The world presents itself to us as solid, immutable, governed by laws we cannot change. We wake each morning to the same walls, the same faces, the same circumstances that seemed to trap us yesterday. Some among us appear blessed by fortune, while others struggle against invisible chains. The wealthy grow wealthier, the successful achieve greater success, and the fulfilled find deeper satisfaction. Meanwhile, countless souls work tirelessly, pray fervently, and hope desperately, yet their conditions remain unchanged. What separates these two groups is not luck, not background, not even effort. The difference lies in something far more fundamental, something that operates beneath the surface of conscious awareness. There exists a principle so simple that it sounds almost childish when first heard, yet so profound that it governs the very fabric of reality itself. This principle has been operating in your life since your first breath, whether you recognized it or not. Every circumstance you find yourself in today, every relationship, every success, every failure, every joy, every sorrow, all of it has emerged from a single source, not from the external world pressing upon you, but from something far more intimate, something that resides within the depths of your own being. The mystics knew this secret, the ancient teachers whispered it in their sacred texts, yet for most of humanity it remains hidden behind the veil of appearances. You have been conditioned to believe that you are at the mercy of external forces. You have been taught that circumstances shape your feelings, that events determine your responses, that the world outside creates the world inside. This is the great reversal, the fundamental error that keeps millions trapped in lives of quiet desperation. The truth is precisely the opposite. Your inner world creates your outer world. Your assumptions about ourself and your life become the blueprint from which your experiences are constructed. This is not philosophy or wishful thinking. This is the operating principle of consciousness itself. When you truly understand this, when you feel it in the marrow of your bones, everything changes. The prison doors swing open. The impossible becomes inevitable. The life you have dreamed of becomes as certain as the sunrise. But understanding alone is not enough. Knowledge without application remains sterile, powerless to transform anything. The secret lies not in what you know, but in what you feel, and more specifically, in what you assume to be true about yourself and your world. Your assumptions are the invisible threads from which the tapestry of your life is woven. In the early decades of the 20th century, when the world was shifting beneath the feet of humanity, when old certainties were crumbling and new possibilities were emerging from the chaos, there lived a man who penetrated this mystery. Born on a small island in the Caribbean, he would eventually find himself in the bustling streets of New York, carrying within him insights that would challenge everything the modern world believed about reality. You are not acquiring power. You are acknowledging the power you have always possessed. You are not learning to create. You are awakening to the fact that you have never stopped creating. Every moment of your life you have been using these principles, whether you realized it or not. Every assumption you have held about yourself has manifested as your experience. Every feeling you have persistently entertained has clothed itself in corresponding circumstances. Every belief you have maintained about what is possible or impossible for you has proven itself true in your world. The difference now is that you can choose your assumptions consciously rather than accepting them unconsciously. You can select your feelings deliberately rather than allowing them to be dictated by circumstances. You can decide what to believe about yourself and your life rather than inheriting beliefs from others. This conscious creation requires tremendous responsibility. You can no longer blame others for your circumstances when you understand that your consciousness is the sole creator of your experience. You cannot continue to see yourself as a victim when you know you are the author. You cannot remain in states of limitation when you understand that limitation is merely an assumption you can change. The price of this freedom is the willingness to take complete responsibility for your life as it is and your life as it becomes. You must own every aspect of your current reality as the product of your past assumptions, not to punish yourself but to empower yourself. When you truly accept that you created what you are experiencing, you simultaneously accept that you can create something different. The reward for accepting this responsibility is nothing less than complete liberation from the tyranny of circumstances. When you know that you are the operant power in your own life, when you understand and that your consciousness is the only reality and all else is simply consciousness pushed out into visible form, you become free in the deepest sense of the word. This freedom is not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences, but the freedom to choose what you want to experience by choosing what you want to assume. It is the freedom to live from your desired end rather than from your current circumstances. It is the freedom to be ruled by your vision rather than by your history. The path forward is simple but not easy. Simple because it requires only that you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, persist in that assumption, and release it to the creative power of consciousness. Not easy because it requires you to maintain your assumption even when everything in your external world contradicts it. You will face the resistance of your old self, the mockery of those who do not understand, the apparent evidence of your senses that your assumption is false. But if you persist, if you remain faithful to your chosen assumption, if you continue to live from the end regardless of beginning circumstances, you will prove to yourself that consciousness is indeed the only reality. The world needs individuals who understand these principles and apply them not just for personal benefit, but for the elevation of all humanity. As you transform your own consciousness and demonstrate the power of assumption in your own life, you become a light that illuminates the path for others. Your very presence becomes a reminder that limitation is optional, that circumstances are changeable, that every individual possesses the power to create their own reality. You are not called to convince others or to force these truths upon those who are not ready to receive them. You are called to live them so completely, so naturally, so successfully that your life becomes a testament to their validity. When people see the transformation in you, when they witness the ease with which you navigate life, when they observe the effortless way your desires manifest, they will ask for the secret, and then you can share what you have learned. The ancient promise remains as true today as it was thousands of years ago. Ask and it shall be given, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. But now you understand that the asking is the assuming, the seeking is the feeling, and the knocking is the persistence in your chosen state of consciousness. You are the answer to your own prayers. You are the solution to your own problems. You are the fulfillment of your own desires, not because you are separate from the divine, but because you are the divine expressing itself as your individual experience. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and that kingdom is consciousness itself, unlimited, creative, and responsive to your every assumption. The transformation you seek is not coming to you from somewhere else. It is coming through you from the infinite depths of your own divine nature. The life you desire is not waiting for you in some distant future. It exists now in you. He eternal present of consciousness, waiting only for your recognition and assumption. This is the end of seeking and the beginning of finding. This is the end of hoping and the beginning of knowing. This is the end of becoming and the beginning of being. You are already everything you desire to be in consciousness. Your task is simply to assume that truth until it becomes as natural to you as breathing itself. The moment you truly understand that feeling is the secret, that assumption creates reality, that consciousness is the only cause, you will never again feel powerless in the face of circumstances. You will know that you are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul, the creator of your world. And in that knowing, you will find the peace, the power, and the freedom that you have been seeking all your life. This man claimed something that sounded impossible to the ears of his contemporaries. He declared that human imagination was not merely the faculty of fantasy, but the very power by which worlds are created. He taught that every individual possesses within themselves the ability to reshape their entire existence, not through struggle or manipulation of external circumstances, but through a precise understanding of how consciousness operates. His teachings were not born from books or theories, but from direct experience. He had tested these principles in the laboratory of his own life and had witnessed their operation in the lives of countless others. What he discovered was a process so elegant in its simplicity that it could be reduced to 3 essential steps, yet so profound in its implications that it offered nothing less than complete liberation from the tyranny of circumstances. The man spoke of meeting a teacher whose name was lost to history, a figure who appeared in his life at the moment when his soul was most ready to receive the deepest truths. This mysterious mentor introduced him to the idea that the Bible, far from being a historical record, was actually a psychological drama played out in the consciousness of every human being. Every character, every event, every miracle described in those ancient pages was a symbol of states of consciousness that could be entered and experienced by anyone willing to make the journey within. Under this teacher's guidance, he learned that the key to transformation lay not in changing the external world, but in changing one's relationship to it. He discovered that by assuming the feeling of already being what he desired to become, by living mentally in the end result rather than dwelling on present limitations, he could literally draw into his experience whatever he held as true in his imagination. The teacher vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, but the student had received everything he needed. Armed with this understanding, he began to experiment with these principles, testing them against every aspect of his life. He found that they worked with mathematical precision. When he assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled and persisted in that assumption until it felt natural, the external world rearranged itself to match his inner conviction. This was not magic in the supernatural sense, but magic in the sense of understanding natural laws that operate beyond the reach of ordinary perception. He had discovered that consciousness is the only reality, and that all phenomena, without exception, are simply consciousness expressing itself in infinite variety. To change any aspect of life, one need only change the corresponding aspect of consciousness. Yet as he began to share these discoveries with the world, he encountered the same resistance that has always greeted revolutionary ideas. The masses clung to their familiar misery rather than embrace an unfamiliar freedom. They preferred to remain victims of circumstance rather than accept responsibility for being the creators of their own experience. The resistance was understandable. For centuries, humanity had been educated into a worldview that made them small, powerless, dependent on external authorities for their salvation. Religious institutions promise salvation in an afterlife while keeping their followers focused on sin and unworthiness in this life. Educational systems trained minds to analyze and categorize, but never to create or transform. Political structures maintained their power by convincing citizens that change could only come from above, never from within. This systematic conditioning had created a race of beings who had forgotten their true nature. They had been taught to worship at the altar of external circumstances, to bow before the gods of limitation, to accept as unchangeable what was actually infinitely malleable. They had been convinced that the world they perceived with their senses was the only reality, when in truth it was merely the projection of their collective beliefs and assumptions. The education system played its part in this great deception. Children were taught to memorize facts and figures, to accept the authority of textbooks and teachers, but never to question the fundamental assumptions upon which their entire worldview rested. They learned about the world outside themselves, but remained ignorant of the world within. They studied the behavior of external phenomena, but never explored the creative power of their own consciousness. Religious teachings, which should have been the pathway to inner freedom, became instead another form of bondage. Instead of teaching individuals to discover the divine within themselves, they directed worship toward distant deities. Instead of emphasizing the creative power of faith and assumption, they emphasized unworthiness and the need for external salvation. The very teachings that were meant to liberate became instruments of control. The result was a humanity that looked saw, and everywhere except the one place where true power resided, within their own consciousness. They sought salvation in external saviors, looked for success in external circumstances, and hoped for happiness in external achievements. They had become addicted to the outer world, convinced that their inner state was at the mercy of outer conditions. This reversal of cause and effect kept them trapped in an endless cycle of effort without achievement, of struggle without progress. They would work tirelessly to change their circumstances, not realizing that their circumstances were simply the reflection of their inner assumptions. They would fight against their problems, not understanding that their problems were the external manifestation of their internal conflicts. The advertising industry understood this weakness and exploited it mercilessly. By constantly suggesting that happiness, success, and fulfillment could be purchased from external sources, they kept consumers in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. The message was always the same: you are incomplete as you are, but this product, this service, this experience will make you whole. The cure was always outside, never inside. Political systems perpetuated the same illusion. They promised that the right candidate, the right policy, the right revolution would solve all problems. Citizens were encouraged to place their hope in external changes rather than internal transformation. The power to create change was always projected onto others, never recognized as an inherent capacity of every individual consciousness. Even the field of psychology, which should have been the science of consciousness, became focused on external behaviors and chemical interventions rather than the creative power of assumption and imagination. Mental health was seen as dependent on external factors, genetics, environment, past trauma, rather than present assumptions about self and world. The result of all this conditioning was a race of gods who had forgotten their divine nature, walking around in rags while possessing the power to clothe themselves in whatever they chose. They had been convinced that they were victims when they were actually creators, that they were powerless when they actually held all power, that they were separate from their desires when they were actually one with everything they could ever want. This great deception was so complete, so pervasive, that even when the truth was presented clearly, most people could not accept it. It seemed too good to be true, too simple to be effective, too empowering to be real. They preferred the familiar pain of limitation to the unfamiliar responsibility of unlimited creative power. But for those with ears to hear and eyes to see, the truth was always available, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the student was ready to receive it. The secret was not really secret at all. It was simply overlooked, dismissed as too obvious to be significant. Yet in that very obviousness lay its power. The most profound truths are always the simplest ones, hidden not by their complexity but by their utter simplicity. The path to transformation reveals itself through three movements of consciousness, three sacred steps that mirror the very process by which all creation unfolds. These are not techniques to be learned intellectually, but states to be entered experientially. They form a complete system, each step dependent upon the others, each one opening the door to the next, until the entire process becomes as natural as breathing itself. The first step requires you to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. This is not visualization in the way most people understand it. This is not seeing pictures in your mind or repeating affirmations until your throat grows hoarse. This is about stepping into the emotional reality of already being what you desire to become, already having what you desire to possess, already experiencing what you desire to experience. Feeling is the secret because feeling is the language of the subconscious mind. Your subconscious does not distinguish between what you are actually experiencing and what you are vividly imagining yourself to experience. To your deeper mind, imagination and reality are one and the same. When you can capture the feeling tone of your fulfilled desire, when you can inhabit that emotional state as completely as you inhabit your physical body, you have planted the seed from which your external circumstances must grow. But this is not about forcing yourself to feel good when everything around you suggests the opposite. This is about discovering what it would feel like if your desire were already a fact in your life. If you desire financial abundance, you must feel the security, the freedom, the satisfaction that comes with having more than enough. If you desire a loving relationship, you must feel the warmth, the companionship, the deep connection that such a relationship would bring. If you desire perfect health, you must feel the vitality, the strength, the confidence that vibrant health naturally produces. The key is specificity in feeling rather than detail in visualization. You do not need to see every element of your desired life with photographic clarity. You need to feel the essence of what that life would be like from the inside. How would you feel about yourself? How would you move through your day? What would be your natural response to the world around you? These feelings become the blueprint that consciousness uses to construct your new reality. This feeling must be cultivated until it becomes as real to you as any emotion you have ever experienced. It must be so vivid, so natural, so convincing that your entire being accepts it as true. The moment you achieve this inner conviction, the moment your assumption feels more real than your current circumstances, you have crossed the threshold into a new state of being. The second step demands persistence in your assumption. This is where most people fail, because this is where the old self wages its most desperate battle against the new. Your current circumstances will not immediately reflect your inner change. In fact, they may seem to contradict it more strongly than ever. This is the testing period, the interval between the planting of the seed and the appearance of the harvest. During this crucial phase, you must live from your assumption rather than trying to get to it. You must think from the end rather than thinking of the end. If you desire to be successful, you do not spend your time hoping to become successful. You think, feel, and act from the consciousness of already being successful. If you desire to be healthy, you do not focus on getting well. You maintain the consciousness of perfect health regardless of what your senses may report. This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to time itself. Most people live in a linear progression where the future is something that will happen to them based on past patterns. But consciousness operates outside of time. In consciousness, your desire is already fulfilled. The future you want to experience already exists in imagination. Your task is not to create it, but to select it, to choose it, to assume it as your present reality. The persistence required here is not the persistence of effort, but the persistence of assumption. You do not struggle to make your desire happen. You simply refuse to accept any reality other than the one you have chosen. You persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled regardless of contradictory evidence from your senses. You remain faithful to your assumption even when the world around you seems to mock it. This is the art of living by faith rather than by sight. Faith in this context is not blind belief, but conscious assumption. It is the ability to remain loyal to your invisible reality until it becomes visible. It is the capacity to be so convinced of your assumption that external circumstances lose their power to shake your inner conviction. The third step involves releasing your assumption into the creative medium of consciousness and allowing it to work. This appears to be the simplest step, but it contains the most subtle spiritual challenge. Having assumed the feeling of your wish fulfilled, having persisted in that assumption until it feels natural, you must now let go of all anxiety about how and when it will manifest. This is the paradox of creation. You must care enough to assume and persist, but then you must not care enough to worry and struggle. You must desire intensely, but then you must detach completely. You must be totally committed to your assumption while being completely relaxed about its fulfillment. This is what the ancient texts meant by effortless effort. The releasing happens naturally when your assumption becomes so established that it no longer requires conscious maintenance. Just as you do not worry about whether the sun will rise tomorrow, you cease to worry about whether your assumption will manifest. It becomes an accepted fact in your consciousness, as natural and inevitable as any other law of nature. In this state of faithful expectation, you watch with quiet confidence as the bridge of incidents begins to unfold. Events will begin to occur, people will enter your life, opportunities will present themselves, all leading naturally and effortlessly toward the fulfillment of your assumption. You do not force these events or try to manipulate them. You simply remain open to the ways that consciousness chooses to express your assumption. The beauty of this process lies in its elegant simplicity. You do not need to understand how consciousness creates reality any more than you need to understand how your body digests food. The power operates by its own intelligence, following laws that transcend human comprehension. Your role is not to manage the process, but to initiate it through proper assumption and then trust it to unfold according to its own perfect timing. Modern psychology has begun to discover what ancient wisdom has always known: that consciousness is the primary reality and that all phenomena are modifications of consciousness. The field of neuroplasticity reveals that the brain is not fixed but constantly reshaping itself based on mental activity. Every thought, every feeling, every assumption you hold literally changes the structure of your neural networks. When you assume a new identity, when you persist in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not merely engaging in fantasy, you are rewiring your brain to match your assumption. The neural pathways that support your old self-concept begin to weaken, while new pathways that support your assumed identity begin to strengthen. Your brain physically transforms to support the reality you are assuming. The reticular activating system, that part of your brain that filters information from the environment, begins to notice opportunities and possibilities that were always there but previously invisible to you. When you assume success, your brain starts to perceive successful strategies, successful people, successful opportunities. When you assume health, you begin to notice health-promoting resources, healing modalities, and supportive environments. Quantum physics hints at an even deeper truth, that consciousness itself may be the fundamental substrate of reality. The observer effect demonstrates that the act of observation influences the behavior of subatomic particles. At the most basic level of existence, mind and matter appear to be intimately connected. What mystics have taught for millennia, science is beginning to confirm. Consciousness is not produced by matter, but matter is produced by consciousness. The field of epigenetics shows that gene expression can be influenced by thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. Your assumptions about yourself and your life literally affect which genes are activated and which ones remain dormant. You are not the victim of your genetic inheritance. You are the conscious director of your genetic expression. Studies in placebo effect reveal the profound power of belief to create measurable physical changes. When people believe they are receiving effective treatment, their bodies often respond as if they actually are, even when the treatment is completely inert. This demonstrates that the mind's assumptions about reality can override physical conditions. The emerging field of consciousness studies investigates phenomena that suggest mind is not confined to the brain. Near-death experiences, remote viewing, telepathy, and other anomalous events point to the possibility that consciousness operates beyond the boundaries of space and time. If consciousness is indeed non-local, then the idea that imagination can influence reality becomes not only possible but probable. Research into meditation and visualization shows that mental practice can produce many of the same neural changes as physical practice. Athletes who mentally rehearse their performances show improvement in actual performance. Students who visualize successful test taking demonstrate better outcomes on actual tests. The brain treats vivid imagination as virtual reality, creating the same neural patterns that would result from actual experience. All of this scientific evidence points to the same conclusion that mystics have reached through direct experience. Consciousness is creative, assumptions become reality, and imagination is the workshop of creation. The three-step process works because it aligns with the fundamental laws of mind and reality. It is not wishful thinking, but scientific application of consciousness principles. In boardrooms and athletic fields, in artistic studios and healing centers, in corporate offices and small businesses around the world, individuals are applying these three steps to transform their lives, often without knowing the source of the principles they are using. They have discovered through trial and experience what the ancient teachings have always proclaimed, that assumption creates reality. There is the entrepreneur who assumed the feeling of running a successful company while still working in a cubicle. She persisted in this assumption, making decisions from the consciousness of success rather than limitation. She released her anxiety about how success would come and instead focused on feeling successful in her current circumstances. Within 2 years, a series of seemingly coincidental events led to her launching the business she had imagined, with exactly the team, the funding, and the market conditions she had assumed. There is the artist who spent years struggling to make a living from his work, constantly focused on his lack of recognition and financial struggle. When he learned to assume the feeling of being a celebrated artist, when he began to think from success rather than toward it, his entire trajectory changed. Gallery owners began to notice his work, collectors started purchasing his pieces, and opportunities for exhibitions opened up in ways that seemed almost magical, but were actually the natural result of his changed assumption. There is the single mother who had been alone for years, convinced that her circumstances made her unlovable. When she learned to assume the feeling of being cherished and adored, when she began to treat herself with the love she desired for another, her entire presence shifted. The confidence and self-worth she felt from her assumption attracted exactly the kind of partner she had always dreamed of meeting. There is the individual who had struggled with health challenges for decades, trying every medical treatment and alternative therapy available. Nothing provided lasting relief until she learned to assume the feeling of perfect health. She persisted in this assumption even when symptoms suggested otherwise, releasing her attachment to the problem and embracing the reality of wellness. Her healing came not through any external intervention, but through the power of her own transformed consciousness. These are not isolated cases, but examples of a universal principle in operation. Every day, in every corner of the globe, people are discovering that their external circumstances are not fixed but fluid, not determined by forces outside themselves, but created by the assumptions they hold within. They are learning that they are not victims of their past, but creators of their future, not prisoners of their circumstances, but architects of their experience. The beauty of these transformations lies not in their dramatic nature, but in their naturalness. When consciousness shifts, when assumptions change, when feeling aligns with desire, the external world rearranges itself as naturally as water flowing downhill. There is no struggle, no force, no manipulation, only the elegant unfolding of inner conviction into outer experience. What all these individuals discovered is that the power to transform their lives was never outside themselves, but always within. They learned to stop looking to external circumstances for permission to feel fulfilled, and instead gave themselves permission to feel fulfilled regardless of circumstances. They discovered that happiness, success, love, and health are not destinations to be reached, but states of consciousness to be assumed. The moment has arrived for you to make the most important decision of your existence. You stand at the threshold between two worlds, the world of limitation that you have known, and the world of infinite possibility that awaits your recognition. Everything you have learned, every insight you have gained, every truth that has resonated within your consciousness has brought you to this pivotal point. The question is no longer whether these principles work, but whether you will work with them. You cannot remain neutral in this knowledge. Once you understand that your assumptions create your reality, once you see that your feelings are the invisible threads weaving the tapestry of your experience, once you recognize that consciousness is the only true cause and all else is effect, you must choose. You can either embrace this truth and transform your life, or reject it and remain as you are. But you cannot unknow what you now know. The choice before you is not merely about improving your circumstances or acquiring the things you desire. It is about awakening to your true nature as a being of infinite creative power. It is about recognizing that you are not a victim, of fate, but the author of your own story. It is about understanding that you are not separate from the divine, but are divine consciousness expressing itself through the unique vehicle of your individual awareness. This recognition requires a complete reversal of everything you have been taught to believe about yourself and your relationship to the world. You must stop seeing yourself as small, powerless, and dependent on external conditions for your happiness. You must cease identifying with your current limitations and begin identifying with your unlimited potential. You must abandon the role of victim and assume the role of creator. The transformation begins the moment you truly accept that imagination is not fantasy, but the very faculty by which God creates through you. When you understand that your I am is the creative power of the universe, expressing itself as your individual consciousness, everything changes. You are no longer someone hoping for a better life. You are the power that creates life itself. This is not arrogance, but recognition of what you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and false belief. You are not becoming something new. You are remembering something ancient.